Hi there, welcome to my channel Ro Can Sew. I'm Ro, and this channel is generally about my personal sewing experiences, but it's been a few weeks since my last video. This is kind of a catch-up of sorts video. Just to kind of give a brief general overview while also trying to maintain some amount of privacy. Last month I started a new job and it has been extremely overwhelming for a variety of reasons. One being just the change to my schedule was just so massive. So the amount of free time that I currently have has been greatly reduced. Along with that, the very little energy that I've had with that free time has made last month challenging. However, I wanted to make this video so that I could provide some updates to my previous videos of the past that I didn't get to kind of finalize any information of. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. So the following information, it all occurred prior to the drama of last month, but I wasn't able to share any of this information because of last month's drama. So first, regarding my sewing machine. I have two Singer heavy-duty sewing machines, a 4423 and a 4452. And for those who maybe saw my previous videos and might recall, the 4423 is the older of the two machines, and it's my preferred sewing machine. One, just because it makes better buttonholes in my opinion, and two, the way the thread flows through the machine, the tension of it just flows more smoothly. So the 4423 has always been my preferred sewing machine. That was until it started skipping stitches. So the 4423 started skipping stitches and it worsened over time. With my online research, I concluded that it possibly was a timing issue, which may or may not have been related to some of the heavy denim sewing that I had been doing previously, in which some of the fabric may or may not have got sucked down under the needle plate, and the extraction process may or may not have caused some drama in the machine. Anyway, long story short, it was skipping stitches. I did my YouTube research, I looked at a lot of videos, and I tried to work with the machine, and I managed to make it worse. So the machine went from skipping stitches to skipping more stitches to not completing any stitches at all. So my machine was in a timeout for a while until I was able to kind of get back to it. I kind of worked on it for a little bit, took a break. After a while, I thought maybe there was some issues with the bobbin tension as well. At any rate, after messing about with it for a while, I finally was able to get the timing set in a manner where it now seemingly appears to be working again. The stitches seem to be completing consistently up to this point. So between that and adjusting the bobbin tension, I think that I've got that back in rotation, and I am very happy about that. The next update is regarding a shirt that I had been working on for my husband. So my husband was in sudden need of a white shirt with Mardi Gras-esque splashes of colors. That's how the request came in to me, and he needed it fairly quickly. So I did share some of the making process in the previous videos, but honestly, I don't remember where I left off. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of how that has come out. This is the shirt that I'm talking about. And I will try to see if I can insert some pictures of close-ups just in case my lighting here is too bright and washes everything out. This shirt is made from the pattern McCall 6044, which is a shirt pattern that I use for my husband often. I've made it several times. I've already tweaked the pattern to make some minor adjustments both to the shoulder and then adding some length to the sleeves and the body because he's like 6'5", so he's tall. So I've already made those adjustments to the pattern. So I've kind of gotten the pattern to the point where we both feel comfortable enough with it, where I can just sort of use it as a base pattern and then have some freedom to play around with personality and personalizing my make with that in mind. So I made the short sleeve version. I made it out of a white cotton linen blend fabric that I already had on hand. And then I used the accent fabric from, let me grab it. This is a 100% rayon that I believe came from Fabric Mart Fabrics. And both of these fabrics I've had in my collection for quite some time. So I'm sure it's probably, wherever I got them from, they probably don't have them anymore. But that's what I had, and that fit what he needed it for, so that's what I used. So the main body of the shirt is out of the cotton linen blend, and the accents are from the 100% rayon. I started with the pocket, which is usually, if I'm gonna play around with his shirt and try to experiment with things, I'll usually start with the pocket to kind of get an idea of what kind of accenting threads or other fabrics I might want to use. I will do that on the pocket first. That way, when I move forward through the rest of the shirt, I feel like that kind of gives me an idea of how I want to move forward. So for the pocket, I cut the pocket out of the white cotton linen blend to go with the shirt, but I added a strip of bias binding that I cut from the rayon fabric, and I just put a strip along the top of the pocket and stitched that down. I also hand stitched with some gold decorative thread, outlining the colored sections on the rayon to kind of give it like a patchwork look. And then I machine stitched that with gold thread, and and I also outlined the pockets itself in gold, which in hindsight might have been a little too much gold, but again, at the time I was kind of in a hurry, so once it was on there, I figured it wasn't bad enough to remove it, and the stitching was nice and neat, so I just moved on and left it. But let me see if I can show you the pocket up close. If not, I'll insert a picture. And you can kind of see the details. In real life, the gold kind of sparkles and gives just a little hint of shine to make the shirt dressier, but not so much to make it too gaudy. At least I don't think so. When I got done with the pocket, I moved on to the collar. And as for the collar, I used the white cotton for the under collar. I used the rayon for the upper collar. And I also used a layer of the white collar to act as interfacing underneath the rayon layer. And I did that because when I have used interfacing with rayon fabric in the past, I have had some issues with bubbling and separating of the interfacing from the rayon over time. And I was hoping that by using the cotton linen blend as a backing, that would still give it structure and reduce the chances of there being bubbling. It kind of worked because I wanted to complement what I did on the pocket, so I chose to machine, in this instance, outline all of the colored sections of the rayon using the gold thread. And I did that with my machine, and I did that with the rayon on top of the piece of cotton linen that I was using as interfacing. And for the most part, it seemed to work okay, although anytime I had to turn corners and you kind of have to shift the fabric, I did have to be very careful so the rayon wouldn't pull and stretch separate from the cotton underneath, because the rayon is just a lighter weight fabric. It's a challis, so it doesn't have quite the same structure to it that the cotton linen blend has. But I think I managed it okay. I just tried to take it slow. And so I outlined all of that with the gold. And then the underside, again, is just the white cotton. But after I sewed the upper and under collars together, I felt like it was still too flimsy. So I cut a piece of interfacing minus the seam allowances, and I sort of tucked it in between the upper and inner collar with the fusible side towards the upper collar, so it would be fused towards the cotton linen that I had was already using as interfacing. I hope I'm making that clear. And then I fused that together before I ended up attaching the collar to the collar stand and to the shirt, just to give it that extra bit of structure and durability. As for the rest of the shirt, I used more of the rayon fabric that I had cut into bias binding, and I tucked it into the seam allowances. So I tucked it into the seam allowance of the shoulder seams, and I tucked it into the seam allowance when I attached the button bands onto the shirt. And I did it in a way where I was sure that the folded edge of the bias would stick beyond the seam line. That way, when I sewed my fabrics right sides together and I tucked the bias in between the two right sides, when I opened that up and pressed the seam open, it left some of the bias binding exposed. On the inside for the shoulder seams, I did like a felled seam, so I folded over and tucked under one side of the seam allowance. That way it would enclose the seam and enclose all of the frayed edges, but wouldn't require me to use the serger. That's just my preferred way of doing seam finishing on his shirts anyway, is a type of felled seam. That wasn't necessary for the button bands though, just because of how the button bands were folded over. But once I did that, I top stitched everything down, and I top stitched. I didn't like how the bias, because of the amount that I left sticking out, and because I didn't interface it when I put the bias, the rayon bias in, it was very soft and flexible, and I thought that it would curl, and I wasn't a fan. So I decided to go back and top stitch that flat for two reasons. One, I just wanted it to be secure and not move around. And two, I thought that if I did it in gold, it would sort of tie in the bias on the pocket and the collar to the bias down the button band and across the shoulders. So that's what I did, and I'll see if I can move that closer to the camera without it washing everything out. You can see that I've top stitched the top in white and I top stitched the bias in gold. The inside of the shirt is all, the bobbin thread is white. Anywhere that I had the gold top stitching on, I just did the bias. I just did the bobbin thread in white. And the reason for that was, again, twofold. One is because the gold thread is more expensive than the white thread. So I wanted to conserve that and only keep the gold thread where visible. And two, the metallic thread can be kind of scratchy. So I didn't want the inside of the shirt to become a skin irritant. So I decided to keep the bobbin thread white. That way, hopefully it would reduce any sort of irritation that otherwise might occur from the scratchy metallic gold thread being on the inside of the garment. The rest of the shirt was constructed pretty much as normal, except for I finished the sleeve and the bottom hem with the rayon bias, and I did it in a way so that the colored bias would stay on the outside of the shirt. And I just top stitched that in gold as well so that it would mimic the other elements. And that's it. That's the shirt. Shirt's done. Like I said, he already wore it and he got compliments on it. Oh, the buttons are gold. I just happen to have some gold buttons on hand. So that's what we use to finish the button band with. And yeah, the color of the bottom hem goes all the way around. And that's it. So that shirt was done, and like I said, he already wore it. He got compliments on it. It worked. So and all of the items I had were already on hand, so that was good. That worked out well. So after I had finished that shirt, I had intended on making a shirt to go with the blue pants that I had made prior, which feels like a very long time ago now. However, because I was becoming aware that July was going to be extremely hectic, I decided that I needed to do some kind of calm sewing, something that I've done before. In addition to that, I had a shirt that is one of my favorites. This shirt happens to be one of my favorite shirts, but I noticed that I have worn it so much it had some holes in it, and I had been wearing it with the holes because I didn't realize the holes were there. So I'm hoping that I can find some time to patch these holes so that I can still get more wear out of this shirt, because again, it is one of my favorite shirts to wear during the summer. It is so lightweight, it's bright, it's cheerful, and it was one of the first shirts that I ever did any French seams on, so I'm kind of partial to it. But for those reasons, I decided to repeat this pattern, and this pattern is the Chelsea Raglan tee from fabricstore.com, and I've made it a few times, but I decided to make it again. And again, I just used fabric that I had on hand. So there are two fabrics One is this blue. This is a cotton voile shirting, and I did use it before to make a shirt for my husband. And then this one is also another cotton voile, which has some threads that I haven't cut off yet. That also was leftovers from a shirt that I made for my husband. So I just made 2 of these, and I'm going to be pretty honest. Well, first of all, let me talk about the pattern. So the pattern is very simple. It just has a front, a back, and then raglan sleeves. There's enough length on the sleeve where you can fold it. The way that you manipulate and fold it, it gives what seems like a faux cuff. I don't know if you can tell, there's like a faux cuff here. Maybe this is better. You can see the top stitching right along here. So it gives like a faux cuff. The original shirt that I made, this one I used the length that the pattern was originally designed for, but I've always felt that that was just a little short for my comfort. So I have already adjusted the pattern just to extend the sleeve just a little bit so that the cuff doesn't bunch up right at the underarm seam. I just felt like the original pattern, the cuff after you did all the folds was just so close to the underarm seam, it just seemed a little crowded in that area. So I just extended the length of the sleeve out just a little bit, just to give it a little more flexibility in that area. But outside of that, I think that the stress that I was starting to anticipate coming from July, neither one of these shirts is really my best sewing. So the collar, the necklines don't really look the best. The bias binding that I put in there doesn't look the best, but nonetheless, they're both wearable, they're both done, they're very simple shirts, they're lightweight, which is nice for hot weather, and I just have 2 new shirts that I can add to my collection. After that, I decided to make one more shirt, so I made an Agostina boxy top, which is the shirt that I'm wearing now. This one I made a few years ago. This is made out of a linen fabric. I think this was kind of like some leftover fabrics. I did some decorative stitching on here, pieced some fabrics together to create my own fabric sheet, and then I made a shirt from it. I just used bias binding for the neckline and non-decoratively stitched fabric for the cuffs. And I'm telling you this because I can't remember if I ever shared this information on a video before. And I shortened the front by making my own tassels and putting some random beads on to create tassels in the front with a split hem. And the back is just plain. So I've used this pattern numerous times because I just like to play around with it. I like to be able to use my scrap fabrics. Basically, if I have fabric and I make a shirt for my husband and I have enough scraps, then something like this I can make for myself. I like it because much like the raglan tee, this one is just a front, a back, and a sleeve cuff, bias binding. There's no closures required, so it does reduce your cost. It's a very simple boxy top style, so it makes it easy to play around with if you want to do things like create a button front, if you want to adjust the neckline, if you want to do different things with the hemline, put the cuffs on, leave them off, whatever. You can kind of play around with it because it's such a basic pattern. I had another cotton seersucker left over from a shirt that I made for my husband, so I don't know that it's the best color for me, but I had it on hand and I really needed to get something simple through my machine. So I just made a plain boxy top with this blue and white seersucker fabric. I just made a split hem. This one does have a little bit of added length in the body. Moving forward, I think I would like to make a couple more of these, but make them even longer in the back to kind of cover my bum area and then make them a little shorter in the front. But yeah, I did a little bit better on the neckline. I kind of paid a little more attention to what I was doing. But yeah, I made this one also to add it to my collection. So that's pretty much where things were left off with at the end of June. My sewing room is a complete mess right now because that's how things got left, and I wasn't able to get back in here at all for the month of July. So it's just fabric, threads, patterns, pattern pieces. It's a mess. It needs to be cleaned. So assuming that I'm able to get this video recorded and edited and posted, if you're watching it, then that all happened. I will likely probably start by tidying my room, reassess things, catching up on any comments that I may have missed, and hope that as I move through August, maybe I can find more of a groove that will allow me to get back into the sewing room, because it would be quite sad for me to lose the creative outlet and the quiet time that sewing provides me. Without going into detail for various reasons. One, that it varies from the topic of sewing and is very personal, but the past 4 years have felt like a very painful and confusing Twilight Zone episode, and it's just been a real struggle navigating through it, and this past month just really went into overdrive with all of that. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much if you've made it thus far. I appreciate your interest and the time that you took to listen to it. I apologize if it seemed like I was talking quickly. It's just that that's kind of how I feel right now. I feel a little pressured and I'm not in a relaxed state at the moment. Hopefully you have had a much lighter and simpler July, and may you have pleasant sewing in the future, and may life be very kind to you. And until I see you next time, take care. And that's it for now. Bye.